This is part 2 of the War Chronicles. I was getting ready yesterday to do what I thought was part 2, and then I had a conversation with the Lord, and it seemed He had more. So this will be a 3-part series. So yesterday morning, I read a report that newspapers and internet sites in the United Kingdom were reporting that they had intelligence that Russia was moving a nuclear warhead into the Ukraine and were planning a preemptive strike. And the site where I was reading the news is written by a man who used to be deep in the intelligence community, and he said that there is actually no report of this happening in the high-level intelligence community. And the first knowledge of it was when it appeared in the press. And therefore it is suspected that the UK would do a false flag nuclear attack and blame it on Russia in order to trigger this war in the Ukraine and Eastern Europe area. So as I was sitting with the Lord yesterday morning, I asked him, Lord, is Britain going to do a false flag nuke? And he said, yes. The revived Roman Empire marches forth from there, and the same atrocities committed by the Roman soldiers before will be committed again, but this time using weapons of mass destruction. And then I saw a finger on a trigger, and I saw the muscles in the finger tense, and I knew there was a hair's breadth of time before utter chaos broke out. And then I saw a mud slinging match. There were a few people on the left-hand side throwing mud on one person on the right-hand side, and mud was going back and forth. And then I looked and I saw that the single person standing on the right-hand side was Putin. And he was deftly sidestepping the clumps of mud that were being thrown by the group on the left, and nothing was sticking to him. And onlookers started to notice that all the mud was stuck on the group arrayed against the single man, Putin. And then I saw a balance scale with a label on its base that said public opinion. And it was tipping slowly to the right-hand side where Putin was standing. I saw people throwing their newspapers away, knowing that they were full of lies and that the rhetoric being spewed in vast volumes from the Western news agents carried no weight. I saw people throwing their phones down on the table and scoffing at what they were reading in the mainstream news. And then I saw what you would call spin doctors in a room with computers, and they were tearing their hair out because their refuge of lies lay uncovered. I saw secretaries in very important offices typing furiously, and emails with the heading classified being sent back and forth across the ocean like red blips on a radar screen, and they were zapping back and forwards from the West, from the United States towards Europe and the UK, backwards and forth, faster and faster they moved, so that in the end it looked like a vast frenzy of fireflies on a dark night. But still the scale stood tipped right down on the right-hand side. And then I saw Boris Johnson rushing down the steps of 10 Downing Street, carrying 2 blue suitcases, the old-fashioned kind that are soft and smallish. and it looked like he was going on a sudden holiday, but he did not have a happy holiday face, and his movements were furtive, like he hoped no one saw him. There were no policemen standing guard outside this residence as he left, and then I saw him driving away in an unmarked car, not his usual mode of official transport. Then my vision was shifted, and I saw soldiers stationed in Eastern Europe penning last letters to their loved ones in case they would not return home from their assignments. They were not Russian or Ukrainian looking, but rather fresh-faced youths from other countries. They held the dog tags around their necks and stared somberly into the mid-distance, and I saw that they were thinking of home and wondering if their bodies would only be identified by these name tags. I saw the atmosphere around them was grey, not like smoke or a stormy day, but the colour seemed to represent the mood, sombre, like men who knew that they were facing certain death. This morning when I got up, I said to the Lord, what should people do with this information that you showed me yesterday? And he said, get their houses in order, and I don't mean spring clean. No man knows the exact appointed hour of his death, but many are those whose souls will be required of them very soon. And I was reminded of the scripture in Luke 12. I just want to read that to you. Luke 12, verse 16 to 20. Then he told them a parable, saying, the land of a rich man was fertile and yielded plentifully. And he considered and debated within himself, what shall I do? I have no place to gather together my harvest. And he said, I will do this. I will pull down my storehouses and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and produce. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have many good things laid up, enough for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your soul will be required of you, and all the things that you have prepared, whose shall they be? So it is with the one who continues to lay up and hoard possessions for himself, and is not rich towards God. Then I was shown a dark hooded figure with a scythe in his right hand. He had his back to me, and he was standing facing the map of Eastern Europe, which I had seen and described in the last message. Then he took a step forward and swung his scythe from right to left, and I knew that I was watching death sweep through the whole region. Then he turned to his left and faced west and swung again. It was strange, because this figure's feet were still planted by the map of Eastern Europe, but a harvest of souls was being reaped in the west by his far-reaching scythe. And when I pondered this, I thought perhaps that the death that would be reaped in the west would have its origin in Eastern Europe, perhaps in the form of missiles or warheads. Then I was shown bondslaves in sackcloth garments in their prayer closets, and they were wrestling with the prospect that they may die sooner than they expected to, in the midst of their plans to be useful in the end times to the Master. And finally the wrestling was over, and peace came, and they came to the point of full surrender to the mysterious and often unknown will of God. You know, it is one thing to surrender when you fully understand what is ahead, but quite another to lay yourself on the altar in complete trust and surrender to the Father, who is not revealing his exact will personally for you. As soon as this surrender was complete, light and peace filled their faces, and they lifted them towards heaven. There was a shaft of light on their faces, and suddenly there was a knock at the door of their closet, and a servant whom I did not see, but who held out a hand with a plate, came inside, and on the plate was a scroll. It was not sealed with wax, but it was tied with a rough piece of twine, the same color as the Hessian garment, like the twine you would use to lead a donkey. And I was reminded of the donkey that was tied up at the meeting of the ways, which Jesus sent his disciples to fetch for him to ride on into Jerusalem, the bondslave donkeys. And each one of these bond slaves I was observing untied their scrolls and read the instructions written inside them. And all the scrolls started with this phrase, "Make haste, take this message, and go urgently to," and then a place was named, a different place for each person. And I suddenly remembered Joseph, who received instruction in the night to take the child and his mother and go to Egypt urgently. Jesus is the message that these bond slaves are being sent to deliver at their appointed destinations. I want to read to you. It's in Matthew 2, verse 13. And after the wise men had gone, an angel appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the young child and his mother and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod intends to search for the child in order to destroy him." And having risen, Joseph took the child and his mother by night and withdrew to Egypt and remained there until Herod's death. So we see there that immediately after Joseph had received the instruction to take the child and to go, he was immediately obedient. So these bond slaves are being sent to deliver the message of Jesus, Yeshua, at their appointed destinations. And then I was shown a storeroom in heaven with a huge wooden door, and it had a circular handle. I haven't seen a handle like that. It was circular but sunken into the door, and you had to put your hand into the circle and press. And then the door opened, and this huge door slowly opened, and a flood of such scrolls, tied with twine, poured out. And I knew that they had been held back for an appointed time, the end time assignments and destinations stored until the bondslaves of the Lamb surrendered in this day in which we live. And I was reminded of Psalm 110 and the verse which says, "Your people will offer themselves willingly in the day of your power, in the beauty of holiness. Out of the womb of the morning will spring forth your young men who are as the dew." And as we know, the dew falls all over the earth. I once had a vision when meditating on that psalm of a rain of arrows shot from a bow in the early hours of the dawn before the sun rose. And they landed all over the earth, and they were so great in their multitude that the enemy didn't know which way to direct the attack, because those who offered themselves willingly had been released from the bow of the mighty King. So may the Lord bless you and give you understanding. May He grant you grace wherever you live on this earth to come to the place of full surrender, that you may be able to say, whether by life or by death, I will glorify my Lord. And as you come to that place of complete surrender, no matter what the Lord's will is for you, there are many who will be receiving scrolls tied with a twine used to lead a donkey, the bondslave donkey that carries the presence of Jesus wherever their scroll instructs them to make haste and go to.